You're listening to the Soulless Minions of Orthodoxy, alternative DVD commentaries. Hello, my name is Josh, and sitting with me in the Soulless Minions studios, as always, is my brother, Justin. Say hello.
Hello, Justin.
Today we're going to be taking a look at last year's 2013's Ender's Game, based upon the long-standing best-selling novel, acclaimed novelist Orson Scott Card. If you're going to watch the movie with us, go ahead and find the sync point, which is going to be the first black frame after the Summit Entertainment logo has faded away. On the DVD and the Blu-ray, that appears to be about 21 seconds. So go ahead and sync that up. I'm going to give you a countdown. It's going to go like this: 3, 2, 1 on pause. When you hear me say on pause, we'll all do so together and watch the movie in sync. Here comes the countdown. 3, 2, 1, unpause. So,
Digital domain.
Justin, I know there's a specific reason why you wanted to do this. Why don't you go ahead and enlighten anyone who cares?
Well, to unfortunately highlight one of my, shortcomings, I'm not a big reader, and actually this book I have not technically read. I actually listened to the unabridged audiobook. So,
at least you're being honest in that regard.
Well, I mean, I can't say I've read the book.
I didn't read the book. I listened to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same thing. It's unabridged. So, and it just happened to be one of my favorites. I really, really enjoyed the audiobook. I've actually listened to it a number of times. So when I heard this movie was going to be made, I was ecstatic. I mean, this book really spoke to me. I really enjoyed the way Orson Scott Card wrote, and so I was really looking forward to seeing a film adaptation of this story.
Well, there's also another reason.
Okay. What is that?
Oh, well, Justin, it's been coming up to me the past couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And saying that he's missed the pseudo intellectual approach that we had in our earlier commentaries. In particular ones where I had read the source material, in this case where it was based on a book, and was quite knowledgeable. I'm doing air quotes, you can't see me. And was quite knowledgeable. Justin was a little jealous, and he wants to sound like the intelligent one. So, Justin, if I was ever intelligent. So Justin is going to be the one to be the smarty pants in this commentary.
We just skipped it, but
yeah.
The scene here we're watching with Harrison Ford, that is actually the first lines of this movie are the first lines of the book, which was really nice.
What was the line?
Well, I'm going to paraphrase it now, but it was we hear what he hears, we see through his eyes, and I'm telling you, he's the one.
Right.
It's paraphrasing it, but that's basically what he said, and it was word for word, which was nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you even like this movie?
I did,
okay.
Actually.
Right.
It's actually pretty faithful to the book. Like any book to movie adaptation, there are going to be differences. There's going to be things that are cut out, but on a whole, it was actually pretty faithful.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. You loaned it to me. It's the first time I've only watched it once. I've read some of the book. This was years ago, and I thought it was good. It didn't get to me, obviously, the way it got to others because I didn't finish it. But that's not saying it wasn't well written. It just wasn't a story, I guess, for me. But I do remember very few passages from it. In the movie, though, considering I really didn't have any book knowledge to compare it to, I liked it. I thought it was competently made. It was entertaining. I didn't think it was beyond excellence.
No, there's a I don't know how to explain it. There's levels to the book that I think are missed in the movie, and I think that would have those differences could have made the difference between a good movie, which I think this is, and I dare say what could have been a classic.
Right. I kind of felt that, and I've said this before, they kind of played it a little safe. with this movie?
Well, they did, and that's some of the things I'm going to go into as far as the differences between the book and the movie. Now, we're actually skipping over a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of exposition, and I don't think very well handled exposition.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like I said, all of the stuff we're seeing is in the book.
I don't doubt that. Of course it is.
Well, sometimes they make scenes up. They're playing a little bit with the continuity just a little bit, but this is basically the same stuff. It opens with Graff and Anderson talking about Endor, and that all happens. And one of the key differences at this point is that in the book, when we first meet Endor, he's about 6. Mm-hmm. And in this movie, he's about 12. That was a concession that everyone kind of knew was going to have to happen, because the book tracks Endor from about 6 years old to about maybe 15-ish. And the producers of the movie, I think very rightly, felt that in order to stay connected to the character of Endor, he needed to be the same actor. So everything that happens to Endor in the book from 6 to about 15 happens to him within about a year in the movie here. And this scene here where Endor beats up Stilson, this is in the book. And I thought they did a pretty good job bringing it to life here. This is one of the first key moments that we get into Endor's head. And again, this stuff with Graff and Anderson watching and being aware of it, this is all in the book, which is great. The whole intention here was to show how strategically adept Endor is, and how brutal he can be, how brutally efficient he can be, which was great. That's something going into this movie I was afraid they were going to lose, because that is violence is an element in the book, in so much as Endor is almost the only one that perpetrates the violence. Mm-hmm. And that's very important for his character. Now, they do change some things from book to screen as far as the violence is concerned, but that Stilson scene was a big deal, because that's the first time we, as the audience, see how Endor deals with that sort of conflict, and I felt they handled it pretty well. But like I said, this is kind of condensed. I mean, we have more. He had an older brother who was rejected, I assume. He did, and this is one of the big differences from the book to the movie, is that in the book, the brother Peter and sister Valentine, they're pretty big of a presence in the book.
I was hoping that you would say that, because they make, the screenwriter, the director, this movie attempts to make such a connection between he and Valentine.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel it. And
no.
I was hoping that you would tell me that she was much bigger presence.
She was. Now, I agree with you completely. In the context of this movie, I didn't feel any sort of emotional connection between Endor and Valentine.
Or much of a chemistry between those two actors.
No, not really, to be honest. No. And
although they're both fine separately.
Yeah. Now, in the book, because like I said, this movie pretty much follows the book, we actually don't get to know Valentine a whole lot in the book before Endor leaves for battle school. So it's one of those things where you, the reader, kind of puts more of the emotion into their relationship than I think is even there on the page. I mean, it's told versus shown, just like it is in the movie here. So in that sense, it is being faithful. But one of the main difference in the book is that we continue to get to know Valentine throughout the book, but completely unconnected to Endor. She and Peter have their own separate little subplot that happens on Earth while Endor's in battle school. And for the purpose of the movie and timing, they cut all of that from the movie. And to be honest, you're not missing anything. The stuff that goes on with Valentine and Peter plays a little bit of a role at the end, but not much at all. Losing it in the book, to me, wouldn't have made a difference, and I don't think it made a difference in the movie. So,
don't you feel scenes such as these? I don't mean right here, but just prior to this one, when they're all sitting at the dinner table having dinner as a family. Mm-hmm. Didn't you think that was not very well done? It was a little too exposition-y. It was.
I
mean, such dialogue as Endor saying, I'm a third. I should have never been born. And then his mother saying, "Oh, we wanted you." It's just, it's a little too much, plot conversation going on. It's all in one scene, in a very short time span. All this is happening very quickly. It's condensed. Mm-hmm. We're never going to get to know who, the parents. So who cares really? But I don't know if they're much of a presence in the book, are they?
No, like I said, in the book, it's pretty much the same thing. You really don't get to know them at all.
Okay.
And anything we learn about them is told versus shown. And it does come off as very superficial. And
I really didn't feel like Viola Davis, right? Viola Davis. Yeah, and Harrison Ford were stretched at all in their acting abilities. I felt they were a little flat. I've seen both of them, particularly Viola Davis, give very powerful performances, really emotion-filled performances, and they feel kind of static. And I don't know if that was intentional, that, as we're highlighting the children, this is, Ender's game and Ender's world, right? So
right.
Are we supposed to view them as obviously not standout characters, because our focus should be with the younger crowd?
Well, in the book, they're not terribly fleshed out either. That basically what we get to know of Graff and Anderson in the book is how they play off each other and how Graff plays off of Ender. Whenever Graff is dealing with Ender, he's acting, he's playing him. So we never really get to know Graff in that sense. And when Graff interacts with Anderson, their interactions serve to further the plot as far as what is this doing to Ender? How is it affecting him? What will he turn into? None of their interactions are personal. So their performances are really just as fleshed out as they are in the book, which is not that much. That being said, I really enjoyed Viola Davis. She has a face that speaks volumes.
Well, yeah, she does. She emotes very well.
And she looks great in this movie. I think that's a wig she's wearing, and she looks fantastic.
I agree, but I feel like she was just a little underused here.
Oh, well, certainly. I mean, just like Ford is underused, but like you pointed out, they're not the stars of the movie either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. I know, but Harrison Ford and Viola Davis, they're such a presence, in front of the camera that when they're not used, I feel cheated a little bit. I expect something from her, and right. I could see it just wanting to get out. Same with Ford.
Now, this is a difference right here.
The character of Bean.
Bean was not in the shuttle with Ender.
Is he? Okay. Well, who? I'm pleading ignorance here. I know there's a sequel, Ender's Shadow, which is
a sequel and a companion.
Well, which is the story from a different point of view.
Right.
So who is Ender's Shadow?
Ender's Shadow is Bean.
He is Bean. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Bean is a few years younger than Ender, which is why he was not on this shuttle flight.
Okay.
And the book Ender's Shadow is, yes, it's a sequel, but it's more of a companion piece.
Right.
Because 80% of the book takes place during it's the same events of this movie, but from Bean's perspective. And it's Bean's story. So, we live his life. But yeah, Bean obviously, for the sake of the movie, they made Bean about the same age, so it compressed everything. But technically, he was not on this flight. He came in later.
Is there any intention to adapt Ender's Shadow?
I wouldn't think so.
Why not?
Well, from a technical standpoint, I don't think audiences would really go for it. And by the time they went around to making it, these actors would look different, so it wouldn't work. But that puking in 0G, that was all in the book, all of this. I was actually really, really surprised just how faithful they were. I would have to say, if I'm being honest, that Orson Scott Card is not the best at dialogue. And I say that only having, like I said, I listened, not read, but having listened to the audiobook for Ender's Game a number of times and Ender's Shadow, dialogue is not his strength. Or at least when it comes to children. They don't sound right. A lot of the lines in this are taken, pretty much paraphrased from the book. But of course, a lot of it is is made up to compress and adjust for the scenes, which is probably a good thing, because his dialogue was very it wasn't the whole Dawson's Creek thing where they talk smarter than they are, although they do. It was more about the slang that they used. It just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the way kids often talk. But here we are, finally at the battle school. This is what, everyone wanted to see in this movie. And I was ecstatic to see it. I was thoroughly excited.
So yeah, battle school.
Yeah, this was another one of those things that people were really, really excited about, because in the book, battle school is not, or I should say the battle room is not that graphically interesting. It's actually just a big square room. And there's a couple of them, but they're just giant square rooms with the stars, what they call stars, those little objects in there. They made the choice in this movie to make it one big environment and have the walls be see-through so you could see space in the background. And I think that was a good choice. I think it worked really well.
His isolation can never be broken. He must never believe anyone will help him.
Well, what about battle school? What do you mean about that set design?
Yeah, what do you think about the look of the station itself?
Thanks.
I don't believe I really have an opinion. I mean, now that you're actually asking me to analyze it, I don't find it that impressive. I mean, it's fine. It's nothing that stands out. I do like the battle room.
Right.
That's interesting. But other than that, it seems a little generic to me.
Okay.
This design, although I said it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But something I did want to ask you that maybe the book alludes to that the movie doesn't, or maybe I just didn't even notice when the movie brought it up. Why in this universe, in this story, are children so sought as being these genius tacticians?
Because
is this something that's alluded in the movie and I didn't notice?
The children?
Yeah.
Yes, but both in the book and in the movie, although just like the movie, the book doesn't go into fantastic detail about it. It's just kind of explained and then done away with. It's that children are able to multitask and handle, like, essentially they're playing games in this movie. It's Ender's Game.
Yeah, I got that part.
Just like in modern day times, kids are far more adept at playing these incredibly intense, very fast games on game systems like Xbox and whatnot.
Yeah, but they don't really go into that in depth.
No, they
in this
don't.
Movie.
And they should have explained that better, because
I knew that the book must, but someone who's not familiar with it, I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, okay, why in the hell isn't Harrison Ford leading this mission, or why isn't oh my God, what's his name? The actor in the end. The guy with the tattoos on his face. Ben Kingsley. Why isn't Ben Kingsley, who's apparently knows how to fight these Formics?
Buggers.
Formics, right? Why isn't he? Where are all the adult tacticians, people who have fought in war, no combat, who teach at this school? I'm like, why aren't they doing this? I'm like, why are they leaving it to these kids?
I know. It actually is not
They don't
explain
it.
well.
And I'm like, well, I don't get it. They all seem incompetent, but they're teaching these kids. So what's the deal? I don't understand. But anyway, it was still entertaining.
Well, yeah.
And I thought
it is glossed over in the book.
And I thought that, you mean in the movie?
Both.
Okay,
in the book and in the movie, that explanation is very glossed over.
Well, it seems like it shouldn't be glossed over. This seems like a very
I agree.
pertinent point. But this here, I forgot the pilot's name, this legendary pilot, the character's name. Can you help me out here? Can you throw me a bone?
Mazer Rackham.
Mazer Rackham. I assumed throughout most of the movie that this guy just did not exist and that this was all made up to build confidence. They wanted a hero to build
right
patriotism of some kind. And then in the back of my mind, the trailer clicked in. I was like, wait a minute, isn't Ben Kingsley in this movie? I remember seeing him.
Yeah, that was something I was really bummed out about. They spoil it in the trailer.
I had no idea, but then it came to me. I was like, wait a minute, he must be the guy because he hasn't shown up yet. You don't use Ben Kingsley.
Well, if you're paying attention in the trailer, you can see his name badge say Rackham.
Oh, okay.
Which
so they do spoil it.
Yeah, that's like the...
Not like that's something trailers don't do these days.
What's that?
Spoil things.
Oh, I know, yeah. That was disappointing. As someone who knew the book, I'm thinking, even if you haven't read the book and you watch the trailer, they mention the name Mazer Rackham in the movie. So if you're paying attention to the trailer, you're going to know he shows up. And that's also an important element in the book, because Mazer Rackham is presumed dead, long dead.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know why the trailer would do that.
I remember parts of the book dealing with the battle room, and I remember that going on for a little while, and it felt a little abridged to me here in the movie.
It was. To be honest, even in the book, the battle room sequences go on a little too long.
Yeah, various methods of learning from Endor's point of view. Well, it's all from Endor's point of view, of course, but ways in which he learned to move within the zero-G environments and picking up tactics and whatnot and adapting to his new environment. Kind of did feel like it went on for a little while.
It did. I couldn't tell you how many battle sequences the book covers, but the movie pretty much condenses them into about 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
And for the purpose of the movie, that was probably a good idea. Even in the book, I could have done without some of it, because basically the sequences in the battle room in the book serve to further illustrate his tactical ability. And excuse me, it goes into great detail so you can truly understand just how gifted a strategist he is. However, I don't think we needed to go live those battle room sequences in time. You know what I mean? It just felt like it was dragging on a bit here.
You mean like he starts waxing nostalgic one day in his bunk? Like, I remember that yesterday in the battle room when I did this, and I learned that. Yeah,
I would have been content in the movie to actually see maybe a montage of battle room sequences, rather than kind of show us from start to finish the 2 or 3 that they do. But I think it worked in the movie.
Well, I'm glad they didn't do montages, because those are such a cheat.
For the purpose of the battle rooms, I think it would have worked.
They're fun to watch, but they're such a cheat. And I hate that. If I ever wrote a movie, I would never write a montage into the movie.
Right.
I wouldn't. It would just feel like such a betrayal to the character. You want to show him learning something. Oh, just throw some quick shots together and show him improving a little bit at a time. I mean, just as the song says, it's a no-brainer.
It's actually pretty disappointing to me, being a fan of the book Ender's Shadow, that Bean is so underused in this movie, because his character is terribly fascinating, and we only get a glimpse of him in this.
Okay. Was he originally first antagonistic when he first met Endor?
He was not so much antagonistic as much as he was very he had an ego, because he knew how intelligent he was. Mm-hmm. And Endor was used to Being at that. By the time Endor meets Bean in the book, he's basically looked upon as a god in this school. And here comes Bean, who's blowing out all of his test scores and things like that, and he's like, who are you? And they do kind of spar a little bit, but eventually they become friends.
Is that maybe one reason why you're attracted to this story so much? Because it's kind of reminding me of Dune, in the way that Paul Atreides was kind of like the chosen one, the Muad'Dib. It was his destiny. He was a godlike character. He had reverence, and so was and is in this Endor. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and no, that's not the drawing.
No, it's not. No, you're wrong.
To be honest, in fact, I think both in the book and in the movie, the way Endor is treated and the way Endor is looked upon by, more so by Graf than anyone else. But it's a little too telegraphed. You know, I would have rather the school discover just how amazing Endor is. But by the time Endor is brought to the school, he's expected to be the guy, you know, and that's a tricky thing. It comes off as a bit heavy-handed sometimes, I think.
Please write back. I haven't heard from you. How are you?
What'd you think of the actor?
Asa Butterfield?
Asa?
Yeah, that's how it's pronounced.
Okay. How did you think he did?
I think he did very well.
Well, how old is he in real life?
He's probably the age he's supposed to be here, about
because
13.
That's something that Orson Scott Card fought for.
That was a huge issue with Orson Scott Card. This movie had gone through many, many different incarnations trying to get made over the years, and Orson Scott Card put a stop to it because the studio kept trying to make him about 15 or 16 and give him a love interest. And Orson Scott Card was adamantly opposed to that.
Well, I almost felt that they kind of did give him a love interest with
Petra. Yeah, you know, as I watched this, I did think to myself, oh my God, they're doing it. They're going there. But thank God in the movie they kind of reel it in, and you just get a sense of camaraderie between them.
Slight
attraction, but that's it. It never goes beyond that. And mind you, none of that is in the book. He never looks at her as anything but one of his soldiers. He likes her. He considers her a friend, but there's no attraction.
Okay.
That's, relationships or anything like that are not an issue in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what they're there for. These are very serious kids. And
no, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Oh, well, just he wasn't interested in Petra in that sense, or she in him.
Well, maybe it's the audience's interest in Petra being superimposed on
No,
Ender's personality.
I think it's there. I mean, you see it when she's teaching him how to shoot, and
right.
when
there's a little bit of tension, even though they're young.
Exactly. They kind of input that in there, and that's all it is. I think you're kind of right. There's more implied than actually happens, and we, the audience, definitely put some of that in there.
I like this guy.
Dap.
Yeah, the actor. He's good.
I like him. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the book, Dap is very bland, but in this, I really like this guy.
Mm-hmm. He has a good, he has a good arc. I'll never salute you, and then he does.
He does.
That was a nice nonverbal communication there when he does salute him.
I like this. Right? Or is this? Here it is. Shut it, Wigan. He's like, seriously, stop. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like this. That guy would make me cry.
Is the Formic adversary, are they as under explained as they are in this movie, as they are in the book? I mean, because they do not. I mean, I know Endor says, I don't really know my enemy. I don't know my enemy. That's a problem. I need to know my enemy, and I don't know them. Do they ever go into any explanation of the Formics, who they are, or what their situation is, why they attacked Earth, or anything in regard to that?
I would say that it's handled in the book pretty much the way it is in the movie. When Endor and company get to the planet or the moon where, the Alliance had taken over the colony that the Formics had, that's pretty much when we, the reader, and in this movie, we, the audience, start to get to know them, because Endor doesn't know. The people of Earth don't know much about them, so we're not told much. That's part of the propaganda that's used in against the characters. That's
why this feels kind of like Starship Troopers to me too.
No, I get what you're saying, but there's a reason for that. Everything done to...
I know there's a reason for it.
But I mean, everything done to these kids is strategic.
Of course.
And they don't, especially when it comes to Endor, they don't want Endor to know anything about these Formics other than that they are
an enemy.
That
they need to be defeated in that.
Exactly, because because out of Endor, Peter and Valentine, Peter is almost like Bonzo. He's very violent. That's how he handles his issues. Whereas Valentine is emotional, and Endor is kind of the bridge. He's a little bit of both. And they're afraid that if Endor gets to know these guys, if he sympathizes with the Formics at all, he will hesitate when it comes to killing them. Mm-hmm. And that logic is extended to all of these kids. It's just these are the enemy. As a matter of fact, they actually do talk about that in the book. And that happens in the latter half of the book, that once Endor defeats them, the world of Earth starts to fall apart because they were only united to beat the Formics. And once that happened, they went right back to their infighting.
Interesting. Oh, that's interesting. I like that touch. Is the ending as
abrupt?
Abrupt, or I would open-ended? I don't know. I don't know what to say. Is it just as it is in the movie, where you're not really sure what's going to happen next, or
No, it's more explained.
Or what the Formic actual motivation was for invading Earth in the first place.
Their motivation was and this is important, and they don't actually say this in the movie, and that's one of the things I think they missed out on, is that in the book there are two separate invasions, two separate attacks. In the movie, it's portrayed as one, that they showed up and Mazer Rackham beat them. But in the book, there's the first invasion, which was they were run off, and then comes the second one when Mazer Rackham takes them down the way he does. And at this point, the people of Earth are waiting for a third invasion and getting ready to launch an attack themselves. Now, I lost my train of thought. What was your question?
The Formic motivation.
Okay, yes. In the book, it's described that the motivation, and they do mention it here, is that they needed water. They were looking to colonize. Now, when they first showed up, it's kind of implied or said in the book that they didn't even know people would be here. And the battle that happened, they were run off, so their intentions were a little ambiguous. Then they show up the second time, and a full-on battle happens. However, we the people of Earth never spoke to them. So the human alliance here never really knew what their intentions were, because as soon as they showed up the second time, we started fighting. And it turns out in the book that that's not really their intention. They were trying to communicate, but the Formics are telepathic. Mm-hmm. They don't have a verbal or written language. So they were unable to communicate with the humans what their intentions were. That comes out later in the book. After Endor beats them, he, just like in the movie here, he encounters the or a queen and is able to communicate with her. And but unfortunately, it's too late. And that's a burden that Endor carries after the battle. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, it's kind of glossed over here, but it is explained much better in the book. And it's actually sad. It's a tragedy because we're assuming that they're bad, but they're not. It's just horrible communication.
Well, I don't think the movie is very subtle. It's communicating that. I mean, it's, I think, pretty clear that they're going to pull the rug out from under you in some way. And since they're so evasive about the Formic motivation, about anything about their character, about the attack, that they're hiding something, that something doesn't sit quite right. So I knew that as the movie went on and the ending started to approach, I knew that Endor probably was never really going to face the enemy, that they were going to trick him in some way. And that obviously those that he looked up to and respected were going to be his real enemy, Harrison Ford, used him.
Right.
The whole fleet or whatever you want to call it used him. They kept the truth from him to satisfy their own goals.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of where the movie was going. Did the book feel the same way?
It did. One of my beefs with the movie is that even if you haven't read the book, I think the movie telegraphs way too obviously the fact that once we get to that final battle, that it's real. In the book, Card does drop a few hints to kind of, if you're really paying attention, to kind of figure out that Endor's final test battle is actually really happening.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where in the book you're like, well, maybe it is, but it's...
Well, you could also tell just as in the time span of a movie, in the time span of a book. I mean, when you're looking at that counterclock on a movie and you're seeing it's over, it's like near an hour and a half, you're like, well, this must be the climax.
Right,
and when
right.
you're reading a book and you've got a few pages left, you're like, well, this must be the climax. Something's
Sure,
going on.
sure.
You can pretty much deduce that.
Well, the book could have theoretically ended with him graduating command school and not have an actual, a physical conflict with the Formics. It could have been just basically this is part one in a larger story. But and even when I listened to the book the first time, I was suspecting that battle was actually happening. But in the movie, I don't think there's any question. It's too telegraphed that what's happening is actually real, which is kind of bad because Endor's a genius. He would have figured that out. The way everyone was acting and the differences of that day, he would have known.
Yeah, I mean, he is a brilliant tactician, and
Exactly.
He didn't discover that, but yet he's also a child, and he's naive.
True, and that's illustrated a lot in the book, and the teachers of the school take advantage of that. That as genius as Endor is, he's still a boy and wants to please the adults.
He wants to please authority. Yes,
exactly.
I mean, that does show in the movie. In the end, when he wins the simulation, he raises his arm in celebration, and he's like, "Is that all? Is that all?" He's excited. He's done what they wanted, and he pleased them.
Right.
Just as any really kid would be, I suppose.
Do you recognize the girl playing Petra?
No.
She's the girl from the remake of True Grit.
Your turn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I really like her.
She's grown up a little bit since then,
little
it looks
bit.
like. Yeah.
She's got a quality. I really like that girl.
You need half a second
Yeah.
to recharge. At least you don't have any bad habits.
And this happens. This is in the book. But
Really?
like you said, they're kind of implying a little bit of sexual tension that is not in the book.
I think that kind of comes from the audience when you see a male and female character together
That's
like
true.
this.
That's true. But, I mean...
When they're alone, in a room, I mean, you're going to pick that up even when you're reading it because you're going to picture it in your mind.
But when the book was read, it doesn't come off that way. But when you see it visually here, before they go into the battle room, they hold hands when they go in.
Right.
And the way that's shot and the way that's done, they knew what they were doing. It was an implied attraction.
Mm-hmm.
They could have had them... She could have taken his hand and pulled him into the battle room, and if it was shot differently, it wouldn't have come off that way. They knew what they were doing. This was the closest they could come to having a relationship without violating the book. And I was okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go too far. Thank God. Now, because of the fact that they have condensed what happens here,
Yeah.
you lose a lot of the subtext to what's going on in these scenes. In the book, Endor gets assigned to one of the teams, one of the armies, and he goes on like that for a while. Then they eventually put him with Bonzo, and Bonzo doesn't let him fight, just like in the movie. But it goes on for much longer, and his conflict with Bonzo is a little more... I mean, it's all here, but you lose a lot of the subtleties. And the time that passes in the book is important because it explains why Endor takes these steps that he does with Bonzo, and why he challenges him, and all that. It's just the nature of converting book to screen. You know, you lose those subtleties, and
tomorrow you can tell everybody that you changed your mind.
I don't know. It is what it is. But this scene, for example, this is right out of the book.
Was Bonzo portrayed as being shorter than?
No, they never mention. They never make a mention of his height.
Okay,
although I was very surprised that
it seemed like they
Bonzo smaller.
Oh yeah, because it seemed like a very deliberate choice to make him shorter than a lot of others. And then I was like, well, that must have been in the book too, to make him threatening but small. Because Endor towers over him.
I don't remember in the book him ever being described as shorter like this. I'm very surprised they did it, because Bonzo's a bully, and
well, I mean that that could be why he's he's so aggressive,
sure.
To make up for his smaller size.
Well, definitely, but still, it was an interesting choice. Especially when it comes to their fight later on, you expect the bully to be bigger.
That's why I never. I mean, no one likes bullies, but I've really never understood aggressive personalities like Bonzo's. Where they're obviously compensating for something. It drives me absolutely insane. I can't stand those kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
You hang back near the gate.
Bonzo might be a man short without it.
He knows nothing about our formation, Stink. He'll
Well,
only
the
get
first big battle.
Yeah. Now, in the book, we've gone to this battle room a number of times, and at this point, Endor is still learning. Just like in the book, he hasn't done much, but he has been in the battle room. He just hasn't done a whole lot yet, and Bonzo doesn't want to use him because he's inexperienced, and he's threatened because Endor is being touted by the teachers as being, Jesus essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing in the book that's covered a lot better. There's a lot of resentment from the kids to Endor at first because of this. Endor, that's part of the thing that happens in the bits of battle in the book before we get to this kind of scene in the book, where Endor has to earn the respect of the other students. He has to demonstrate to them through action that he is something special, and I think that's kind of lost here. And that's just something that the books are able to do. It's able to take the time to do that, but because it's condensed,
I wouldn't say it's completely lost.
No, like I said, it's not lost. You
in moments such as these, where he's obviously a strategist. He came up with. He hasn't done that part yet. Sorry. Well, he will. It's a short moment, but he does, and he impresses them.
Mm-hmm. And his being put on Bonzo's team was not just a random thing. The school, and that's something that is definitely, I don't want to say definitely left out, but it's shortchanged in the movie, in that Graf, whenever Endor gets comfortable, Graf changes things on him. And if there's someone that he has conflict with, like Bonzo, he intentionally puts Endor near him because he wants to see what will happen. He knows full well that Endor and Bonzo are going to conflict, and he wants to see how Endor's going to handle that, just like he enjoyed seeing how Endor dealt with Stilson in the beginning of the movie. Everything done to Endor is a test, and Graf, very often in the book, and even in this, makes it clear that he's not Endor's friend. He is here to push him to the limits of what he can do. And the only way to do that is through conflict. So whenever there's a chance to put Endor in a difficult position, he puts him in it to see how he can handle it.
What year is this supposed to be?
I'm not sure if they actually say it.
Okay.
This stuff looked great.
Yeah, I don't know what the budget was on this, but
it's pretty good.
They did a good job.
Yeah, I love that the battle room was made transparent as opposed to the non-see-through walls that it was in the books. It really allowed for a visual dynamic that wasn't there before.
Is the design of the space station as you imagine it would be? Or is that changed up at all? I mean, I know they changed the battle room, of course, but...
All they really did to the battle room was make the walls see-through. The battle room was really very simple. The station has a very 2001 feel to it in its description. This kind of gets it. I mean, I never really thought about the exterior of the station as they portrayed it.
Let's go again. But use your arms, not your hips. Officer on deck.
It's Tai Chi Quan. It's called the crane block.
I thought I told you not to train with her. I thought we'd agreed that free time was free, sir.
Is Bonzo as big of an asshole
Oh yeah,
in the book as he is here?
he's even worse.
Okay, really? Okay.
Yeah, because the school fosters this sort of behavior.
Right.
And in the book, it's pointed out that Bonzo is very much like Ender's older brother, Peter, where he handles everything through hostility, through violence. And that is one of the things that the teachers are aware of, and why they're very curious how he will handle Bonzo. Bonzo is that extreme, and even Petra is almost like the Valentine here at the school.
If the adults are so keen on strategists, then why do they foster such hostility?
For the same reason why they don't tell them much about the Formics. They need them to be killers.
Yeah, killers, but not blind killers. Not
they don't care.
Killers absent of thought. I mean, they nurture Ender because they see that he is a strategist, he's a tactician. He thinks his way, and he uses violence when necessary.
They would have been perfectly content with Bonzo, but Bonzo's problem was his ego. His ego got in the way, and it prevented him from accepting ideas from other people. It was always his way or the highway. He was very intelligent, and they had high hopes for him.
Well, they don't paint Bonzo as being particularly intelligent in this
No,
movie.
they don't. See, that's one of those things that's lost.
Okay, he's just a bully. I mean, with an ego. That's all.
But see, you have to keep in mind, everyone in this school is a genius, Bonzo included. His problem, though, is that he is quick to violence and close-minded.
Well, because they really don't paint too many people as being geniuses in this school. Maybe a few of the other kids, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, still you get the feeling that Ender is the cream of the crop, but...
He is, but everyone in this school is a genius. But yeah, I agree. It doesn't entirely come off that way. Bean is a good example of that. He's just portrayed as, a good, smart kid, but in the book, he's a flippin' genius.
But not as well-rounded as Ender, obviously.
Oh, not even close. I mean, not in Ender's Game, the book. In Ender's Shadow, yes. But in the book, he is dealt with somewhat superficially. But Ender does deal with him a lot more than he does in the movie. And that's important in the book because he ends up instinctually treating Bean the way he was treated.
Okay.
And in doing that, he kind of... He was able to put things in perspective as far as how he was being treated and why and things like that.
Did this happen in the same way?
Pretty much.
This mind game kind of transference.
He's in the book. He spends a lot more time playing it.
Mm-hmm. But it's the same concept. He's a rat or mouse. Okay.
Yeah, and it is explained in the movie, but it's gone into a lot more detail in the book that the queen is the queen Formics is injecting herself into this. Mm-hmm. Because they are telepathic, she's able to impose herself into the game, and that's how she's trying to communicate. Eventually,
do they make
figures
clear
that out.
Well, as in the movie, he does.
Yeah.
I mean, do they make clear? Well, does Orson Scott Card make clear how it is that the Queen Formic is able to access the right human mind. I mean,
not really.
Why Ender? I mean, out of all the people,
it's
why
really
Ender?
not. It's really not.
Okay.
And part of the reason for that in the book is that we don't know. Like, the humans don't know. Ender doesn't know. That's something I like, and that's something that Card does as a writer. If the character doesn't know, then we are not told. So it's left ambiguous. I don't know why. And it's not really pointed out in the book why she zeroed in on Ender, but she did.
I just wish that this movie didn't paint the adults as being just without a clue. I mean, they just can't seem to figure anything out. You know, Ender figures everything out, and that is
something that even in the book they don't explain, because, like you were saying,
I mean, everyone
they have adults that are, you know, trained tactical military people.
Right. I mean, and everyone isn't in the military, are they?
Right.
I mean,
no, they're not. But
there are still philosophers and people who contemplate,
of course,
life in general.
And even in this movie, you have to ask why. You know,
that's why. I mean, I just don't understand. Where's the wisdom? There's no wisdom from any of these adults. You get wisdom from age, from life, and as a young person, Ender does not have that. So, you know, it must come from someone older, and it doesn't. That's why I don't understand why all the adults are just completely absent of any of those traits.
Well, in the book, they're not absent of those traits. They're just desperate. But I will say that they don't explain that very much.
Do you think they'll fall?
Because just like in the book, we get reintroduced to Mazer Rackham. And you have to wonder why Mazer Rackham isn't the one leading the battle at the end when he could.
Right.
They do it in the movie, but it's done a lot more in the book. That when Ender gets to command school as opposed to battle school here, he basically becomes the one-on-one student of Mazer Rackham, and Mazer Rackham continues his strategic training. And whenever he does the simulations, that's something that's very much condensed. Just like at battle school here, they go into the battle room. When he goes to command school, they basically go into the simulator, and they have simulated battles with ships as opposed to just individuals like this. And whenever he battles the Formics, he's supposed to be battling. The Formics are supposed to be being essentially played by Mazer Rackham. However, it's revealed at the end that all of those training battles that he was having with Mazer Rackham were in fact him fighting actual battles with the Formics as the fleet battled their way to the Formic homeworld.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, see, that's something that was really skipped over in the movie, and I think should have been, you know, alluded to a lot more. That he had a lot more battles, and that Mazer Rackham, he was deceived, and he thought he was fighting Rackham, but he wasn't. He was fighting real Formics. But even then, Mazer Rackham is still portrayed, both in the book and in the movie, as a tactical genius in his own right. So, like you're saying, why are they going for these kids? In the book, you have to ask the same question, and they don't answer it. Not really, which is why wasn't Mazer Rackham in charge of that fleet?
Okay, well, I'm glad they're...
Now, they do... They just like in this, they point out that Mazer Rackham's success in the battle was part luck.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, because they're painting him as this brilliant strategist, and yet in this video they show over and over again, it seems like he was just one pilot of many, and he happened into a situation where he chose correctly. He guessed almost, or he saw something, as Ender points out. I'm like, so that makes him brilliant? This one moment?
Unfortunately,
I don't think so.
It's that way in the book also.
I was like, I wish they would have shown him having some kind of career afterward, where he led battle groups, and the battle of R2 459 and 36.5, something where he there was a timeline where it showed he grew from that moment, but it just shows this one moment. I'm like, well, Yeah, if Picard only did the Picard maneuver and that was all he was known for, I don't think that would work. You got to show him having his career in Starfleet,
Mm-hmm.
But just showing that one thing, not enough.
I agree.
Well, a book with these holes, to me, this surprises me. Don't you think? I mean, doesn't it surprise you that it's as acclaimed as it is?
The book?
Yeah, with these kind of holes in it.
Unfortunately, I re-listened to the book and in anticipation of doing the commentary, and because of that, I went into it with a certain analytical approach that I didn't before, and
12 down, 20 to go. They could be right behind
did start to see some of these holes. But even with the holes, it's still an excellent book. It's more about the characters than it is these issues of plot. But I couldn't help but notice them, just like you're noticing them. And given that it is such an acclaimed book, yeah, I got to agree with you. It's kind of surprising that it has these kind of holes. And it wouldn't have taken much to explain these things.
These, I don't know, these tactics don't seem like anything any of the other geniuses in the school couldn't come up with. I mean, am I wrong in that? If they're all supposed to be so intelligent, certainly they could come up with tactics such as these. I mean, they're not brilliant tactics to me.
Well, yeah, I think this is the one where he puts everyone in a big, cylinder and plows through.
Yeah, I mean, but, tying someone to a rope, I'm sure someone would have thought of that by now. I mean, certainly he's not the first.
You're right. And even the way it's portrayed in the book.
I mean, these are very simple capture the flag tactics these other cadets are using right now. Guard the home base. It's just rather, they're not even... It's for someone who is as aggressive as Bonzo is. He's not doing anything. He's waiting. I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, and you said Bonzo's actually supposed to be intelligent. In this movie, they don't paint him that way anyway. Just aggressive. Does he actually win more battles in the book?
Yeah, are we there yet? Almost. Keep close. I can't get hit. Keep shooting.
Part of his group here is a character named Alai. And he's in the book, and he's in the book a lot more than he is here. He becomes one of Ender's friends. In fact, Alai, he's another one of the top students. And he's interesting in the book because he sees Battle School for what it is, and they have tried to promote him to the leader of an army a number of times, and he's refused because he doesn't like what the school does, but he still wants to be a good student, and he doesn't like the manipulation and what it does to their egos and so on and so forth. That is briefly mentioned in the movie, but a lot more attention is paid to it in the book, and it makes Alai a very interesting character.
Does this happen in the shower? Does it happen in a shower?
It does.
Okay.
It's actually this is a scene that when I watched the movie the first time, I was really waiting for because it's a pivotal moment in the book. And basically, this is how it plays out. The key difference in the book is that what Endor does to him is more deliberate. What happens here is Endor, gets backed up against the wall on the sink, and he kicks him backwards, and he falls, and it looks like he kind of breaks his neck, right?
Right.
In the book, it's basically this same very quick kind of fight, only Bonzo gets him essentially in like a bear hug, and Endor, being smaller, he drops himself down, throws himself up, and throws his head up into Bonzo's nose.
Ooh.
And shoves that puppy right up. And his actions were both instinctual and that's not going to sound right, but He did it on instinct, but that instinct was based on training. You know, he knew what he was doing, at least subconsciously. He took a physical action that he knew would end that fight. And it wasn't as though he pulled a gun on Bonzo or anything like that, but he did something that he knew would stop that fight. He wasn't trying to kill him, but he was trying to efficiently stop him because he knew that Bonzo was going to kill him. And when Endor drove his nose up into his head, that stopped him. And there was a ton of blood and all of that. And then the teachers came and they took Bonzo away. But kind of like in this, the way it's played is that Endor is never directly told whether or not Bonzo survived that attack. You know, here you see him. Mm-hmm. He's not dead. They're working on him. But in the book, this doesn't happen. Once Bonzo is taken away, we never see him again. And Graf tells him, "Oh yeah, sure, you know, he's okay. We sent him home and all of that." But even in the book, Endor doesn't really believe it. But he doesn't have any actual proof, so he's able to, you know, accept it. But just like in the book, this action pushes him beyond what he can handle at this point, and he quits and he goes home for a little while. He has that talk with Valentine that he's going to have here shortly. Mm-hmm. But
does he use this leverage over them the same way he does here?
What do you mean?
Where he threatens to resign unless he gets to leave, unless he gets to go home.
Well, I think it was a lie. That a lie kind of had the same attitude with the school, which is, I'm here. It's kind of like the army. It's like, I'm here. You've drafted me, and I accept that I'm a good soldier and all of that, but I'm not going to play it your way. So he refuses to be promoted. He just says, I'm not going to do it. You know, and because he refuses to lead, they keep him in a soldier position. Endor is now trying the same thing, and of course he basically got that from a lie, from conversations he had with a lie, where he now can say to Graf, "Hey, I'm done. You can keep me here, but I'm not going to do anything." The only difference between a lie and Endor is that Endor is Jesus, you know, mm-hmm. and they need him to fight. So whereas they're content to let a lie just be a soldier, they need Endor doing what they need him to do. So he actually has leverage over the teaching staff.
Does this conflict exist between the two characters the same way here, where Viola Davis's character is, the compassionate one?
Basically, yeah. She plays it a little more compassionately.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, Anderson is a man.
Okay, well, right. Well, I didn't know that, but that's good to know. But
that's a big difference because now, because she's a woman, we're imposing these maternal instincts on her.
Of course. Nurture,
Yeah, sure. And in the book, Anderson is a little more concerned about their mental well-being.
Mm-hmm. But at least you said there, as in, because she doesn't seem to be very worried about many other of the students other than Endor. I mean, the focus is Endor, of course, but you think she would be concerned about all of these students being used.
She is. We just don't see it.
Okay.
Where's Endor?
Hello, Valentine.
And this does happen. This does happen in the book. Graf needs Valentine to get Endor to go back. They can keep Endor on that station, but
mm-hmm.
they can't force him to work.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to.
They can't change his will. I mean, he'll do what he wants. Yeah. I mean, do they? Because there's a line, a dialogue in here where she actually says, they wanted me to convince you to go back, and then she actually starts to talk as if she believes it, and I'm thinking, well, does that character actually believe it? I mean, is she actually as brainwashed as the rest of the population? What's going on? Is Valentine supposed to be?
Well, no, she's not brainwashed. She knows how gifted Endor is, and she loves him as a brother. But she is fully aware of it.
She actually takes on the mindset more of Harrison Ford as opposed to Viola Davis in this. I mean, she just isn't coming off as aggressively as Harrison Ford, but she actually says something like Harrison Ford, where, like, we need you, basically saying is your sacrifice will benefit all of us.
Well, she doesn't see him as making a sacrifice, really.
Well, I mean, but she's endorsing that standing. Where, Viola Davis was saying, what about the boy? What are we doing to him?
Right. Now, keep in mind, Valentine does not know everything that's gone on at the school. She knows what Graf has told her. She is being kept in the dark to the tactics being used at the school. She is aware of what happened with Bonzo, but she is also being misled as far as just how serious it is, just how violent Endor is. She has her sister goggles on. And just like at the beginning, she's sad to see him go, but she wants to see him fulfill his potential. She wants to see him be the next Mazer Rackham. And she doesn't want to see, this person who is full of potential just retreat and hide. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't agree with Graf's ways of doing things, but she does know that Endor is needed. And you have to understand also in the book how we get to know Valentine is she gets on what is their version of the internet, and she starts this political blog, and so does her brother, both under fake names. And somehow these personas, these avatars that they create, polarize the world, and they become these famous political figures, even though no one knows who they are. And their influence is tremendous. And so when she's talking to Endor now, she's also talking to Endor as someone who is very aware of what his potential actions will be in the future. It's kind of complicated. It's hard to explain. And in the book, I found it boring. All of the stuff that dealt with her and Peter becoming these political figures. It was boring. I really don't know why Card went into it. There was a lot. I mean, a lot.
These are the subplots you were alluding to earlier?
Yeah. And to me, personally, it just screamed of Orson Scott Card wanting to express his beliefs, his political beliefs, or this and that. And that's all it came off as. In their political actions, Valentine is still the sympathetic one. Peter is the aggressive one. It doesn't expand their characters, really. It shows them taking actions, but we don't get to know them really. It's hard to explain, but it just doesn't. It was boring. It was a boring part of the book.
I gathered that. You used the word boring many times.
I really don't. It had nothing to do with Endor. The only time it comes into play is at the end of the movie, where at that point, Peter, because of this political thing they've been doing, has become an important political figure. Like he's. I don't recall if everyone knew about his, online avatar. But he had become an important person. He becomes essentially kind of like the president by the time Endor is done with school and won the battle and so on and so forth. But really, I could have done without it. This is the story, to me, is Endor's journey. I really was not interested in Valentine or Peter. I didn't care. So I'm glad that stuff was taken out of the movie. To me, it slowed the book down. But I digress. But this is the way it happened. He spoke with Valentine, and then he decided to come back, and instead of going back to battle school, they graduate him now to command school. And now instead of the battle room, he does the simulations, and he's going to meet Mazer Rackham here shortly. Yeah. But see, like in the book, because they make more of a... they explain more the relativity and the fact that to travel at such a distance at such a speed, anyone back on Earth will be dead.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they actually do that in the book. He sticks to the science.
Oh, okay.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So his whole family is dead, is what you're saying. Everyone.
They should have been. They should have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're telling me that his sister, his brother, everyone is dead.
Well,
so what's...
that's actually that's the time difference, because I'm confusing some of the different plot lines in the story. Like Mazer Rackham, because he went this distance, for him it hasn't been that long, but to everyone else, that second battle where Mazer Rackham blew up the ship and all of that happened like 100 years ago or something.
Okay,
but not to him.
Oh,
It was a lot more recent. And when Endor, because of this time difference of space travel and all that, when he does get to go back to Earth and so on and so forth, Valentine and Peter are older. They've achieved things by then because of this difference in relativity.
Oh, I see.
It's not really important in the movie, but it does. Well,
I mean, that just brought something to mind in the video sequence where they show Rackham, defeating the Formics. They show them flying around with look like modern F-15 looking aircraft, and you never see any other antiquated aircraft any other time except in that scene. But that makes sense if the movie was going by those rules, that to him this was over 100 years ago, and technology has advanced. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And they kind of imply it in this, but in the book, they are expecting a third invasion. They're just trying to beat the Formics to it, because of the amount of time it takes to get from Earth to the Formics' homeworld. It takes time, and they are operating under the assumption that by the time word got back to the Formic homeworld that second invasion failed. Mm-hmm. Their intention, the Earth's alliance intention, was to have their invasion force already on the way. Mm-hmm. That's not really explained in this, because the issues of the distances involved aren't really dealt with in the movie. But they are, I mean, obviously we're attacking them, but we're attacking them on a clock for a reason.
Well, how far is the Formic home planet supposed to be?
It's supposed to be really, really far.
Okay.
Really far.
Well, I mean, because they never make any mention as to if they're going faster than light or anything like that.
They're not. They're not actually exceeding light speed, but they're getting so close to it that they're having that.
Okay, so they're not using like wormholes or anything like that.
No,
they're actually...
that's why you see Endor kind of in suspended animation.
Okay. So, yeah, light speed is not possible. You said he follows the science.
Right.
Well, yeah, we're talking over Ben Kingsley.
Yeah.
Underused.
Yeah.
Can't bring Gandhi into the movie and then not really use him. See, he's in like an F-15. He's in a fighter jet. It's strange.
Yeah, that is weird.
Looks like the Formics use Buckaroo Banzai technology,
Yeah. Lord Warfin is on.
Yeah, what are they called? The lectoids.
Red lectoids.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The black lectoids.
Right.
Now this, I mean, it's implied, but it is further explained in the novel that the reason why these videos are edited are because the government doesn't want the world to know that they essentially beat them with luck.
Right.
They want the world to believe that Mazer Rackham was this genius, and that
Well, no. They kind of explain that in the movie a little bit.
It's just done more.
Well, they drop lines on it, but that makes me think of Babylon 5. They covered up the real reason why they beat the bald people with the bone on their heads. Can you help me out here? No?
Thermal imaging from a satellite.
You mean the Minbari?
Yeah, that's right, the Minbari. Yeah, don't you remember that episode where they picked up, was it Sheridan, or was that the first captain?
Yeah, Sheridan. No.
Was it?
No, Sheridan was the second one.
That's Bruce Boxleitner.
Yeah.
Who's the first one? Who's the first cat?
I forget his name. Sinclair.
I knew that both started with an S. Yeah, they picked up Sinclair. They found out that he had a Minbari soul. That's why they let him go, and that Earth people were being born with Minbari souls or whatever. But that was kept from the populace at large.
Right.
And just as this was here, I know that I don't know. I just thought I'd make that comparison. It's nice to be able to bring up Babylon 5 in a conversation.
Yeah, because we don't spend a lot of time with Mazer Rackham here in the context of the movie, his behavior is odd. In the book, it makes more sense because he knows, first of all, that he got lucky. Well, I mean, he was basing his actions off of, intelligent thought processes and everything. So it's not like he's a buffoon who just did something lucky. I mean, he did have the presence of mind to see what he saw and so on and so forth. But they have him do this thing with the tattoos, which I don't recall being in the book, and he's just kind of a little weirded out. And given that he didn't conduct some sort of grand military design, you do have to wonder why he is put in this role of Ender's mentor now, because
they're painting. They paint him as a sage, and he did just one thing.
Yeah, exactly. And and if you think it's done the same way in the book, but because you get to know him a little more, you don't think about it too much. But even when you analyze that, you're like, well, wait a second.
Well, that's basically like taking the character of Randy Quaid from Independence Day, because he did the exact same thing.
You're right. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, you're a brilliant strategist, Randy Quaid, because you decided, you figured out through some way.
Hey, boys.
Yeah, I'm back. Right, that go flying up into the middle of the ship and solve everything. So you're going to lead the next mission. Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
That'd be essentially Randy Quaid now teaching the new guy. And you're like, why? You were just some guy. He was obviously he was a pilot and all of that, but he didn't do anything terribly. He wasn't doing anything on the level that Ender can do strategy wise. He was just looking in the right place, and he saw that pattern.
Right.
Which
just begs the question. If they're not going to paint him as anyone other than just being this guy who took a lucky shot, then why is he training anybody?
You're right. I never really thought about it that way, but you're right.
It's the I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's also the same question as, well, if he's such a brilliant strategist, why isn't he leading the mission?
Well,
it's
even in the book,
yeah,
Ender thinks he is battling him in the simulator,
right? Yeah.
But he's not. He's actually fighting actual battles.
Yeah.
So
that's
again is another example of why the hell is.
Well, that's why I thought
deal?
they were painting this Mazer Rackham to be a myth, not a real guy. I never thought there would actually be a Mazer Rackham.
Now, they did in the book. They did intentionally keep Mazer Rackham away because they never let him go back to Earth because he was supposed to have sacrificed himself, and at some point he might have exposed the luck involved in what happened. So he was never allowed to go back. It's part of the reason why he's here, but as we're pointing out, his role in Ender's teaching really is kind of not necessary because he hasn't really done anything, that Ender could learn from.
They will issue orders to their squadrons of drone pilots.
Wouldn't this be like sending in the cadets from Starfleet Academy? Would you want to do that? Would you want to send in Red Squad? No. Look what happened. They were arrogant and naive. Look what happened. So, you would want to send in Cisco, not Red Squad. To me, that's why a lot of this does not just. It's entertaining to watch. It just doesn't make it. There's got to be one. Sorry.
Well, they're just going on this idea that the children are more adept to see things and look at this as a game in ways that adults simply can't.
Well,
that's why the illusion is always.
They really need to make that more clear. That's what I'm saying, because they don't.
Yeah, it's a lot more clear in the book. But even then, it's not as clear as you would like it to be. But it is gone into a little more detail.
Chain reaction spreads outward, shattering molecular bonds. Leaves nothing standing.
That's the beauty of the Little Doctor. No need to identify a specific ship for the Queen.
Were the Formics portrayed as I mean, they had queens, but you know, were they actually described visually as looking as they do, as ant-like?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay. Well, you know, I mean, sometimes the writer isn't completely.
Yeah, I mean,
clear.
Card leaves a lot more to your imagination than people realize.
Okay. I mean, you said the same things about some of the aspects of Dune. You know, Frank Herbert didn't necessarily explain what a thopter looked like or anything like that.
Yeah, you hear it, and your brain fills in some of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like Card has talked about how people have commented to him about the violence in the book. You know, that Endor does, both to Stilson in the beginning and then Bonzo. But there's really not a whole lot there. It's your visualization of what that is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fight with Bonzo, it's almost no fight at all. They push each other a couple times, and Endor throws his head up at him. That's it. And in the book, he kicks him a few times. Now, in the movie, we get to see the blood and all of that. But in the book, you know, he makes no graphic descriptions of, you know, the goriness of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's our, you know, our minds filling in the blanks.
So these are actually in the book supposed to be real battles, and he is unaware. Does Endor work with in the book? I mean, in the movie they show him working with all of his other cadet friends, but in the book, is he alone with Mazer Rackham the whole time, or are the other cadets actually involved? Do these characters go with him?
Oh no, these characters are there.
Okay,
they join him in command school, and after the battles, he'll talk to Mazer Rackham, and you know, Rackham will instruct him.
Well, what's the reason for, at least in the book, for the fleet bringing in these other children to command school when they know that, you know, Endor's going to be the one to lead?
Because he has a working relationship with these kids.
Okay.
And these kids are
all brilliant too. Yes.
Well, yeah, but they're control. The way Endor works, and this is the difference between him and Bonzo, is Bonzo tried to control everything, and at first Endor did too, and Mazer Rackham had to teach him to delegate better. He's controlling the battle as a whole, but he is allowing Petra and Bean and these other ones to control smaller groups, and that's why they're there. Their genius is enough to do that, but he's conducting the whole thing. See, now here he loses this battle. He thinks it's just a game that he's lost, but in reality he has lost an actual battle, and that's happened because he is not delegating properly. He's trying to control everything. He's still learning.
Well, that's what they're telling him right now.
Yeah, of course it's delved more into in the book, but yeah, he goes through a whole learning process, but unfortunately he's actually losing real lives. That's where they're so pissed at him. They're like, you can't keep taking these losses because he is losing real ships.
See, it's writing shading like that, you know, where I think this movie really would have benefited from, to give it a little bit more depth. I mean, as I said, I mean, I'm guessing the book isn't incredibly long, is it?
I couldn't tell you how many pages it is.
Well, how many hours is it? Audiobook for?
It was a number of hours.
Well, how many? What?
I don't recall.
6 hours? 7 hours?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, that's not too long of a book then. 6 hours. That's relatively modest.
I don't think it's not like Harry Potter, you know.
No, yeah, okay.
Nothing needs to be that long.
Well, you know, that's probably going to be 200 to 300 pages, you know, most likely. That's not too dense, but I'm I don't know, considering studio tendency these days to expand their monetary gain. You know, they'll split up a book into multiple parts. You know, The Hobbit, for instance.
There are other ways to
and Twilight, I think, had the same thing happen to it, as you recall.
Yeah, they split the last book.
Yeah, I mean, I know they did that with Harry Potter, but I've heard that was quite necessary, as the last book was incredibly long.
Right.
But why they didn't want to do this with Ender's Game, fill, I don't know, stretch it out a little bit,
I don't think there was a need to do that.
No.
I like I said, for the most part, they pretty much got everything that's in the movie, in the book. And as I pointed out, they cut out entirely the subplots with Valentine and Peter, and then they just condensed the battle sequences in the battle room and all of that. I think they did a pretty good job, and the problems that you are pointing out in the movie are problems in the book. Having said that, they really should have tried to address those things a little better. I'm surprised they didn't.
You go when you're ready enough.
The character of Mazer Rackham is, I think, unfortunately, we're finding a problem that I didn't really think about before. But you're dead right. In the role that Mazer Rackham played in the real battle and the role he's playing in Ender's Education here. Mm-hmm. I wish they had addressed those things in the movie, because they are shortcomings of the book upon analysis.
Sir?
Oh, we're at the final battle already.
Which in the book is supposed to be his final graduation battle.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If he wins this, then he graduates and he's an officer, and so on and so forth.
But he's just a kid. It's so weird. I know Orson Scott Card, really was very protective of this.
Very much so.
And as with a lot of authors are of their work, but this was published in 1985, and look how many years it took to get it to the screen. I mean, he wanted it done right. And I wonder if you've read or heard anything about his feeling of this adaptation, how he felt they did.
About this actual movie? Actually, I have not.
Okay.
He talks in the audiobook, he talks a bit about the history of trying to get the movie made, and how studios would try and trick him in the contracts to make the character of Ender older and give him a love interest and so on. And he was adamantly opposed to that. And he would shut down deals based on that.
Praise to him too,
absolutely,
for sticking to his guns, for not letting him, fuck with his vision,
And for a while, he didn't think it could be done because of the ages of the kids. But more recent movies, and he actually cited Peter Pan as an example, were full of kids giving very good performances.
Yeah,
and he started to think, hey, maybe this could be done now. So I have no doubt that he was involved with this movie, but I just don't know to what level. Even the extras on the Blu-ray don't mention him, believe it or not.
Not a mention at all. That's
not really.
Surprising.
No, he's not interviewed.
Is he a recluse? I mean, is he?
He's unfortunately become very well known for his personal beliefs and imposing those beliefs into his books. He's Mormon.
Oh, he is. I see.
And has a belief structure that is connected to that. A lot of people find him preachy, which, like I said, is part of the problem in the middle of the book when it deals with Valentine and Peter and politics and all that. And it's like, dude, I don't want to hear your beliefs on politics through these characters. I don't care. Get me back to Ender. That's where the story is. But nevertheless.
See, now Harrison Ford is going to mention to Ender that, lives were lost during this battle. People, there were troops or whatever on these ships, and they died.
Yeah, all of these ships are piloted by real people.
Okay, so because the way that they're portraying this, at least on a superficial level, it looks to be as if Ender and his all the other cadets are actually controlling these ships.
They're not.
They're just delegating.
They're
tasks.
issuing orders.
They're issuing orders because it looks like they're robotic. Is basically what it looks like, and they're linked to them and they're controlling them is what it looks like.
Right. No, that's why Endor needs all of his team there, because one person is in charge of this platoon or whatever, and that person is issuing all of those orders and sometimes having to be creative and do things on their own while still going along with Endor's overall strategy and plan. But essentially, they are simply giving commands to the individual fighters and telling them where to go, rather than have Red Leader as part of that group. Red Leader is Bean or Petra or so on and so forth, with Endor being the master orchestrator.
Okay,
but Petra does control the little doctor, just like this.
The way these battles are being waged, it doesn't seem necessary that human lives would even need to be in the mix. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems like they could just send drones out there, basically.
Yeah, but I guess you'd have to imagine that if they did, and if they broke down, who's going to fix them? You need real people.
I suppose. I mean, they don't really address the human factor, even though there's humans here. Still, it doesn't seem touched upon.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you're not supposed to see that because you need to be.
Because Endor doesn't see it.
Well, yeah, it needs to be revealed to you later after the fact. Yeah, I mean, but still.
I know what you mean. It's the same way in the book. It's not gone into fantastic detail. It's they had to launch this fleet shortly after the second invasion, and they had to put people in those ships, and they had to develop the technology that allowed Endor to communicate with those ships, which is called an Ansible in the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's a communications device that they reverse engineered from Formic technology that allows them to communicate anywhere across the galaxy instantaneously, which is how he's able to have control over these ships in real time, because they are tremendously far away.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Endor is nowhere near this.
Well, I mean, that's portrayed here, but
I mean,
they don't make
very far away.
No, they don't make a reference to the actual distance. I mean, you can assume it's far away. I mean, this is outer space we're talking about here.
Right.
I mean, the Formic planet isn't in the solar system, so
no.
It must be far away, at least some light years, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, they don't pay attention to the science as you mentioned. So there's no way to think about it. You could think of this as a Star Trek kind of universe where they can go warp 10 or whatever,
Right. Yeah, see, now at this point, you have to know as the viewer, even if you're unfamiliar with the book, that this is real.
Oh, that this something isn't right. That this is
and the only thing that it could be is that it's real.
Oh, of course. There's no other. I mean, there's only two endings, A or B. So I mean, it's
now in the book, because of the amount of time we spend in command school, with Endor continuing his learning in the simulator. This is the simulator. He is being worn down. He is mentally destroyed at this point. He almost went into this final test ready to throw it because he was burned out.
Mm-hmm.
But of course they had to keep pushing him because they were on the clock. They knew when their fleet was going to reach the Formic homeworld, and they needed him ready at that time. So they timed everything for this final test to be the final battle.
Mm-hmm.
But he was done. He almost threw this, but he decided, nope, I'm going to show all you fuckers that I am the genius, and blah, blah, blah. But he almost threw it, they knew that.
Yeah, well, there was that, I don't know, there was that brief moment of hesitation in the beginning of the battle here when one of the characters turns around and says, "Oh, their gate is down," and he hasn't reacted yet.
Bean tells him that the enemy's gate is down because Endor has kind of lost it. It's not so much that he's hesitating as much as he just doesn't care, and he is being thrown by the fact that in the book anyway, this battle is different. He goes into it and it starts up, and he's like, "Wait a second." he knows something's off, which challenges him. But he's a little thrown by it, but he's burned out, and it's all this stuff. And Bean has to help kind of right him and go, hey, focus, remember this? And he's like, oh, okay, I'm good. But when this revelation comes out, Endor is, he's broken from this point on.
Why are we watching these images?
Now, in the novel, it goes on quite a bit after this. The movie wraps it up fairly quickly here. He goes, he finds the queen and blah, blah, blah. It goes on for a while. What happens to the world? Like I said, the governments of the world go back to their infighting. Endor is not really allowed back on Earth because the people in power don't want all of the things that they have done exposed. Because what they've been doing to these kids is almost tantamount to child abuse.
Well, yeah.
And in fact, Graf is put on trial because some of it has come out, and he's put on trial for war crimes.
And this is all part of the denouement?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's put on trial for war crimes. He's exonerated, but that was part of the conflict between he and Anderson, because Anderson, even in this, makes the argument of, we're going too far. We can't do this stuff. And he's like, no, we have to. We don't have a choice. So he does have to answer for that stuff, but he is relieved of the charges because of the situation, because of the extreme nature of the us or them attitude. But they don't want Endor coming back to Earth for a number of reasons. Because of all the infighting within the governments, some governments want Endor to use him as a strategist, and some governments want to kill him because he's dangerous. For a lot of reasons, Endor is not allowed back on Earth. And the book ends with he and Valentine going to another colony to just move on and continue forward, and people know who he is, but he's not revered in the same way he's revered and feared on Earth. It goes on a little long, in my opinion, but it sets up where Orson Scott Card wanted the character to go, where he becomes a speaker for the dead, is how it's referred to. Because he is so affected by this, he feels that someone should remember and speak for the Formic race. And because he's the one that killed him, he feels that should be him. So his character goes on and essentially does that. He becomes this almost like a messiah kind of a character. It's kind of weird. The second book, which is called Speaker for the Dead, is very, very different. It's Endor's an adult, and it's hard to explain. It's weird. It's not this movie at all.
Well, I mean, did you actually? Well, I know you didn't read it. Did you
to
listen to it? Listen to the whole thing?
I did,
Okay.
and I found it nauseatingly boring.
Really?
Yeah, and it got a little interesting towards the latter half, but it took a long time to get going, and I didn't feel the payoff was worth it.
I wonder if all of Orson Scott Card's stuff is in the same vein. If he paints the human race in that kind of short-sighted way throughout a lot of his work.
I don't know. I'm only familiar with this, Ender's Shadow, and Speaker for the Dead.
I see.
But as much as they got right in this movie, unfortunately, it's sad that they didn't address some of the things that they could have. And it would have been very easy to. Most of it could have been done through dialogue.
Well, yeah, I kind of felt that they really abridged some of this movie. I could feel, even though I don't really remember much about the book, even the parts I read. Considering that this movie is under 2 hours, why not, expand upon it a little bit? People don't seem to have that big of a problem with longer running films these days.
Yeah, see, now like this stuff that they're doing right here, in my opinion, this didn't need to be here in the movie. Because in the book, that's setting up the sequel that he was already planning on doing. So that was in the book for a reason.
Well, this stuff here,
they will never make a film version of Speaker for the Dead.
Oh, obviously, but
it will never happen.
Of course.
So,
okay, wait a second. But so you're saying they just should have ended the movie after Endor finds out that he just killed the Formic race, and it should have ended on a down note?
I don't think, in the context of this movie, knowing that they will never make Speaker for the Dead, and I'm saying that just because Speaker for the Dead is not something that will translate well to the screen.
Okay.
I think the movie would have been a little more powerful had it ended with him, yes, realizing that he committed genocide, and still end it with him leaving with Valentine and leaving a broken man. But I don't think we needed to see him encounter the Queen and
I see.
Deal with all that. In the context of this movie, not the book, but the movie, I don't think we needed to see it. The movie's over. This feels very anticlimactic to me, this last 20 minutes.
Probably because you've read the book. For me, it does make sense from a Hollywood standpoint to leave us on a brighter note.
But I don't feel this ends particularly bright. Do you?
I said brighter note. It's still not. It's a down note. He committed genocide. He's very upset about that, but he's also has to redeem himself, and here is the first step to his redemption. And that's supposed to leave you satisfied in some way. It didn't really leave me satisfied, but I think that's what the intention was.
Yeah, I didn't find this to be a satisfying ending to this movie.
Oh, not at all. I would have been perfectly content with it having a complete down ending, and he just finds out that, I committed genocide, the end. I was tricked,
Yeah.
That would have been cool. I'm like, oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah,
it's no Empire Strikes Back ending, you know what I mean? Where everything goes wrong. He's actually able to come out a little bit ahead.
Right. A lot, just like Dune, a lot of what happens in Ender's Game happens in his head. And like, take for example, you see it happen way earlier in the movie when he gets to battle school and he walks in and he sees that everyone has gotten their bunk and they've left the very front bunk for him. For whatever reason, that front bunk is not the prized bunk to have. And they leave it to him because at that point he's been touted by Graf as, being Jesus, essentially. And they kind of want to stick it to him. So he has this whole dialogue in his head about using that, like, once he's been put in that position, what can he say, what can he do to still come out in a position of power? So after this internal dialogue, he ends up saying to everyone, hey, thanks. That's exactly the spot I wanted. Thank you for, doing what I wanted. He's basically playing a psychological game with the kids. Now, in the movie, he walks in and he says that, but it has no meaning, because we're not in his head. And that's one of those things where they were faithful to the book in that he says what he said in the book, but we've lost the subtlety. And I think that's the biggest crime of this adaptation, is that a lot of the subtlety is lost. Now, you could make that argument
that's why a lot of adaptations have voiceover.
Yeah, but and I know you can make that argument.
To get us into the mind of the character.
Right, and you can make that argument about probably any book-to-screen translation. Sure.
It's all over the place.
But, I think the voiceovers in Dune, help tremendously.
Well, because that book is so dense, you know what I mean?
I just think that if they, say, ended the movie without us meeting the Queen through Endor, they could have spent a little more time fleshing out some of those little things, showing us more of his interactions with the kids in battle school, showing more of his mental breakdown that's happening. Because prior to his fight with Bonzo, he's pretty in control. But the manipulation that's happening from the teachers to Endor is huge. And there's a constant conflict between Graff and Anderson over breaking him. And Graff's attitude is always, if it breaks him, then he's not our guy. If he survives, and I think he will, then he is our guy. The way Graff sees it, they don't have anything to lose. The battle is coming, and they want him to be the guy. They think he's the guy. They're preparing for him to be the guy. Although they make no mention of what would happen if Endor did crack. Who would take over? I would have kind of liked to have known, but they don't really go into it. And also in this movie, as you pointed out, there seems to be no chemistry between Endor and Valentine. And Valentine is...
Well, there's also not much... Valentine doesn't do a whole lot.
No, nor does she in the book in direct connection to Endor.
Mm-hmm.
She's in the book, but like I said, totally unconnected to him.
Right, and the fact that it's played by... I forgot her name.
Abigail Breslin.
Right. Kind of distracts me a little bit.
See, now look, we see him flying away.
Right.
And I know there's dialogue addressing where he's going, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're trying to end it on a slightly, happier note.
Uh-huh.
But I would have preferred to see it end in the spirit. You don't have to have shot-for-shot scenes from the book to the movie, but as long as you keep the spirit, I think you're okay. And given what the movie is and that there won't be a traditional sequel, I think they could have ended it the way I suggested before. And if they did do a sequel, it would have to be a completely made-up sequel, as in not
Speaker of
the Dead.
Right.
Because no one wants to see that. No one's going to want to see that.
Is it really? I mean...
It has absolutely nothing to do with the movie we just saw.
Well, I mean, is it as derived? Not derived. I mean, is hated as?
Oh, it's not hated.
Okay.
It's just a different story entirely.
Well, no, I
this
mean,
one
is.
I
mean, you criticize it as being really boring.
Oh,
it is. Is that the general consensus? Is what I was getting at.
I think there are people that love Ender's Game, and there's people that love the sequels. They're usually not the same people.
Okay.
They appeal to a different audience. I probably would have liked Speaker for the Dead a lot more had I not experienced Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow and loved them. I wanted more of those characters. I wanted more of those stories. And the sequels aren't about battle school or anything like that at all. They start going into metaphysics and politics and all that, and I just didn't care.
Yeah, I'd probably be right where you are with that.
Yeah. And honestly, as far as like the marketing of this movie, they made a big deal about the fact that Abigail Breslin is in it. Who cares? Right? I mean,
she's a hot young star, so that makes sense.
Is she?
It's a marketing tool. Yeah, she is.
I know who she is, but I don't really see the big deal.
Well, I mean, she's an up-and-coming actress. I mean,
that's all she is. She's up-and-coming.
Yeah, that's a marketing tool. They're going to use whatever thing they have to their advantage.
I don't know. I don't think it was a big deal, personally.
I don't know. I mean, didn't they...
And I think that's one of the flaws of the movie, is that they're trying to...
I mean, they play up Harrison Ford and Ben Kingsley. I mean, they're not... I mean, Ben Kingsley in particular. They put him on the poster, don't they?
Yeah, which they shouldn't have.
Right. It's... I mean...
Well, speaking
how effective
of Harrison Ford, we
been?
never talked about that. What do you think about Harrison Ford?
I did talk about that.
You talked about his character, but what do you think about him
I talked about that too. I mentioned that he was underused. I mean, I mentioned when you put.
Let me rephrase that.
Okay.
What do you think about the casting of Harrison Ford?
Mistake.
Okay.
He brings too much baggage. I'm sorry. Harrison Ford is Harrison Ford. He's a great charismatic actor.
Mm-hmm.
Not particularly so much in his latter career, his later years,
Where he's just phoning it in.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like 6 Days, 7 Nights, for instance. Yeah. And some other ones too.
What's his line in that movie that we like?
Oh, sure. Well, like, glue it back on. But if he was really gonna bring it, you know what I mean? But he just doesn't, and I haven't seen him bring it in a long time. So when you attach Harrison Ford to this movie, it just, it's Harrison Ford. It's not that character.
It's not Graff.
It's not Graff.
I think you're right. The character of Graff kind of begged for a character actor.
Right, just like Viola Davis is a character actor.
Mm-hmm.
She's not a star. You know what I mean?
Yeah, now she was really good, but you're right. Ford brings baggage. His performance is perfectly fine.
And so does Kingsley to some degree, but not as much as...
Yeah.
Kingsley he doesn't phone it in. He's not the same type of actor that Ford is.
Right.
But you agree it should have been a character actor. So
I agree.
We're on the
it
same
should have
page.
been, because when I see him, it's Han Solo. It's like, get Chewie and go blow that thing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I said, it's nothing against his performance, but the character as written is rather two-dimensional. And when you see Ford, you expect more. So, yeah, it's like you said he was underused, but you say that because it's Harrison Ford. If it was another actor, I don't think we'd be having the same conversation about the character. You know what I mean? And that's baggage. That's the baggage he brings. You expect more. Off the top of my head, I can't think of who could have played the character, but many people could have. It's written that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that being said, I think Endor's casting was very good.
How about Michael Ironside?
He's too intense.
Too intense.
You need someone who's a little more bland. I pictured Graff as slightly overweight.
Okay.
And generic. Just a generic, but not necessarily two-dimensional, just generic.
Okay.
Okay. There's nothing exceptional about Graff, but Harrison Ford is exceptional. So, it's tricky. But yeah, that's my thought.
I basically agree with that, as I've already said.
Hell, they should have had they could have
can't really add anything to it.
No, he probably wouldn't have been a good choice. But
who?
Sling Blade.
Billy Bob.
He's got that paper pusher kind of a thing. Harrison Ford is a man of action.
Yeah.
Billy Bob is not a man of action. So you'd believe that he's the head of this school and he's intense and he's driven and so on and so forth, but not a man of action. Not Harrison Ford.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The kind of guy I would imagine is Henry Cerny, the guy that plays the head of the Mission Impossible force in Mission Impossible. That guy with the glasses.
Oh yeah, sure.
That guy, that kind of guy is who I picture being Graff. He's a character actor. He's that guy.
Yeah, this the way I know. You should have gone with that guy actor. Like
exactly.
That guy who was in that thing.
Exactly.
I think Viola Davis should have been almost the same way. Although, as I said, she is a character actor. She is a little bit more well known.
Yeah.
And as being a good of an actress as she is, in the performances she's done, I think that she was just it was a mistake to cast her. Because she is so good at emoting, powerful performances, and she's done that on screen. Just as I'm sure the guy from Mission Impossible is too. We just haven't seen that though.
Right.
We've seen Viola Davis do that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the movie's over. So, well, should probably end the commentary. What do you think?
Alrighty then.
Okay. Closing thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, I wish I had better explained myself as far as the things that the book did and how they related to the movie. But when you're watching the movie things happen so fast, and you want to play catch up and go, oh no, wait, don't you get this? But
I think you're fine. I'm sure when you eventually listen to this commentary, you're like, well, I did a good job. I think you'll be satisfied with.
There's a lot of subtleties to the characters' actions in the book that I don't think I properly conveyed.
There's always going to be stuff you're going to leave out. There's so much more in a book than can be mentioned in the span of 2-hour movie. You're going to miss things. That's inevitable. But I found everything you said very insightful, and it helped me better understand what they were trying to do here in this movie. Certain things like, Endor not knowing that he was actually fighting Rackham, that whole time,
Right.
That was interesting. I had no idea, that's certain things that brought to light that made some of this movie more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress.
Well, so. I guess to summarize, I've said it probably like 3 or 4 times now, but I as much as they got right in the movie, and they got a lot of it right. This is an example of where I think the movie should have differed from the book, in that it could have corrected some of the shortcomings. And the book, as we've unfortunately pointed out, is not perfect. There are some issues with it.
Well, maybe because, Orson Scott Card was so protective of his material that, he didn't want much of it changed.
Well, it wouldn't have taken much, like we pointed out, a line of dialogue here, a line of dialogue
there.
He may have corrected it.
Well, he's obviously so attached to this story that he doesn't, he's like, fix it. What do you mean? Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I would very much like to have heard a conversation with a producer or something where someone asked him, hey, wait a second.
Well, I was really disappointed that this disc doesn't have him on the commentary.
Yeah.
I surely thought that he would have, considering...
Given what it's taken to get this made, you would think he'd be all over it.
Yeah, I was like, there's one from the director, I think one with the producer. I was like, where's Orson Scott Card in this?
They do not mention him.
I was really surprised. Maybe he had a falling out during the production. I don't know.
Maybe he did. Like I said, I've heard he's kind of difficult. So, yeah. Anyway, this is the movie, and I think it's a fair representation of the book. It's going to be better enjoyed by someone like myself who understands the subtleties of what's going on with these characters, but it's also frustrating because of some of the missed opportunities they had, and that they didn't. Sometimes you can't literally translate book to screen. You have to make adjustments, and I think the ending of this movie is an example of that. Well, we didn't need to see him meet the queen. That really wasn't necessary. It just wasn't. Not in the context of this movie. In the book, okay, even though it goes on a little long, in my opinion, in the book, but in the context of this movie, I don't think we needed it, and it's screen time that could have been used addressing some of those other issues that I pointed out, getting a better sense of who Bean is, getting a better sense of some of the other kids in his army, further demonstrating his isolation from the other kids as it goes on because of the stress he's put under. So I want to see him break. And in the movie, really the fight with Bonzo is what we see break him. Other than that, he's pretty tough. I would have liked to have seen that degradation of his soul, essentially, as they break him. So, yeah.
Well, is that everything?
I think so.
Okay. All right. This is Josh from the Soulless Minions. Thanks for listening.
This is Justin. Thank you. Good night.